In life and business, it's never the loudest shout that changes the direction of the wind. It's often a single, unexpected word spoken at the right moment. When that word comes from a place of conviction, rooted in strategy and confidence, even the world's most powerful nations pause to listen and react. There are moments when history doesn't move in a straight line. It pivots suddenly because someone dared to speak with clarity when everyone else chose caution. What followed wasn't just diplomatic noise, it was a reaction that revealed how true strength lies not in muscle, but in mindset. Keynote 1-800 words. A single word, when backed by national confidence and clarity, can shift global power dynamics without a single bullet fired because it symbolizes something far greater than language itself. It becomes a declaration of intention, a signal that whispers louder than any roar, and in that moment those at the top pay attention because they know real power isn't always shown with armies or economics, but with the kind of posture that says, "We don't blink first." Through history, those who rise from humble beginnings often understand the price of dignity better than those born into advantage. So when a country's representative chooses not to speak in riddles or diplomatic camouflage, but instead drops a word that reveals a new psychological position, rivals feel the tremor as much as they hear the sound. Suddenly, boardrooms in faraway places begin asking questions if they may be losing their grip. Analysts comb through footage for hints of weakness or strength because they know such moments can be turning points. The surprising part is how small that linguistic spark can be, like flint against steel, needing only friction to ignite something uncontrollable. And the United States, used to years of unquestioned dominance, finds itself caught slightly off guard when someone it once expected to remain obedient or careful no longer conforms to that expectation. They watch with narrowed eyes as that confidence spreads across media platforms and young minds, turning one word into a rallying cry, signaling that a greater shift is already underway. This shift isn't just economic or technological, it's psychological. And once that line is crossed, the reactions are as much emotional as strategic. Suddenly, meetings are held behind closed doors about how to recalibrate public messaging, wondering whether the world is observing a crack in the facade, because perception in geopolitics can become reality fast. The smallest deviation can snowball, particularly when audiences are hungry for a new narrative, and so what began as a single statement becomes a pulse that travels faster than any press release. The surprise lies not in the vocabulary, but in the audacity, the willingness to say something thousands have thought but few have dared voice, and that audacity lands like a stone in a still pond, creating ripples out to the edges far beyond initial intention. Eventually, questions arise internally among U.S. policymakers about whether their traditional playbook is outdated. They're forced to decide if they double down or adapt, all because the other side is no longer intimidated by reputations built decades ago. True influence is not the ability to enforce, but the ability to inspire without lifting a finger. And here lies the quiet genius of that single word, which suggests a level of growing certainty that cannot be ignored. Suddenly, news commentators begin calling it a diplomatic earthquake. Social media users convert it into memes and slogans. The simplicity of it is exactly why it works. Meanwhile, younger generations look up, noticing how assertiveness is no longer exclusive to the West. They find pride reflected in a leader who doesn't stumble when given the opportunity to stand firm, and thus the narrative shifts from reacting to Western agendas to setting the tone of the conversation itself. Across universities and think tanks, conversations begin about whether we've entered a new era of multipolarity, where emerging powers no longer need permission to speak boldly. The US response becomes a measure of its own insecurity because every move it makes afterwards looks like a reaction instead of leadership. And this role reversal can feel uncomfortable because being caught off balance reveals vulnerability. And vulnerability in global politics can be blood in the water, yet this plays out silently, invisibly, at first only noticed by those who truly understand the psychology of power. Gradually, even casual observers realize something has changed, wonder whether what once seemed impossible is now inevitable, that perhaps the era of dominance is facing its twilight not through war but through words, so that single utterance becomes a catalyst that triggers not immediate collapse but slow reconfiguration, challenging long-held beliefs about who leads and who follows. And while the reaction from America may still appear powerful on the surface, those paying attention know hurricanes often begin with gentle winds, the kind that appear harmless right until they converge into something unstoppable, because the human spirit, when unafraid, speaks truth even when it is inconvenient for old powers to hear. In that truth lies a disruptive force more dangerous than any missile system, because it spreads hope among those who once believed they must stay small, teaching them to lift their eyes, straighten their backs, and decide the future rather than inherit it. Keynote 800 words. The U.S. reaction wasn't just political, it exposed how deeply influence is tied to perception, not position. Because when someone unexpected delivers a message with confidence, the world begins to question who truly holds the steering wheel. In global affairs, image often precedes substance, and once that image cracks, it becomes difficult to glue back together again. So while officials may project calmness beneath the surface, many are scrambling to contain the ripple effects. Narratives are fragile systems, built over decades through consistent messaging that America stands at the center and others orbit around its decisions. Yet this moment punctures that narrative, sharply reminding everyone that gravity can shift. Such reminders are dangerous to any superpower because they encourage others to reconsider their own weight in the world. The US quickly realizes it must respond not for the sake of policy, but to reassert perception, because losing the narrative often leads to losing leverage without ever firing a weapon or negotiating a treaty. And so diplomatic channels begin buzzing not with outrage but calculation. They ask themselves, how did a word become a weapon? What happens if more nations adopt this posture? How does one counter confidence without appearing threatened? The irony is that the more attention they give it, the more powerful it becomes. Journalists seize on this tension, framing it as a sign of shifting tides. Thousands of comments appear online cheering the boldness, all of which forces American strategists to prepare a reaction that won't fuel the fire yet also won't look like silence. Silence in these moments is dangerous because it can look like defeat. So they respond with carefully crafted phrases meant to maintain composure. But the world can sense unease underneath. Allies whisper, wondering if the United States is losing its grip. Critics argue that history teaches no power remains immortal, yet few imagined that the first major tremor of change might come through something so simple as posture rather than force. Unexpectedly, even domestic audiences begin reassessing what they believed was an unshakable global order. Debates erupt in cable news studios where some analysts insist the US must remind everyone why it still dominates, while others warn that overreaction will only prove the point being made by that single unexpected word. Behind closed doors decision makers know they're fighting not just geopolitical challengers, but the momentum of an idea whose time has come. When people begin believing change is possible, they act differently, and that shift in behavior multiplies rapidly. creating a feedback loop that weakens old structures. Therefore, the response isn't just about maintaining alliances or trade balances, but about closing the psychological gap that has suddenly appeared. Everything from posture at press conferences to tone in official statements becomes crucial because audiences are reading for clues. If any sign of panic leaks, it validates the challenger more than any speech. In the past, the US relied on an assumption of inevitability, that it would always set the terms and others would fall in line. Now it discovers that maintaining influence in a more equal world requires not just power but humility, adaptability, and perhaps most importantly, a recognition that the world no longer wishes to be managed from a distance. Yet adjusting to that reality is painful because it means stepping down from a symbolic pedestal constructed over many decades. The real surprise isn't that a country finally spoke with such clarity, it's that doing so didn't require permission. For years, emerging nations felt compelled to soften their tone to remain in favor. Now they realize favor is overrated if it requires silence. The US response therefore becomes a mirror reflecting not strength, but introspection, as they review internal strategies about how to remain relevant in conversations they no longer fully control. The stage is no longer singular, where one actor dominates the spotlight. It's evolving into an ensemble cast, and each new voice brings its own perspective. Once that door opens, it's difficult to close because ideas spread faster than borders can contain. Meanwhile, young diplomats across the developing world find inspiration, seeing that protocol can't coexist with courage. They begin to imagine themselves not as junior partners, but as future equals. And with that shift in identity comes the willingness to speak differently, even if it causes discomfort. Change rarely arrives with grand announcements. Sometimes it creeps in through small gestures that awaken something dormant in the collective imagination. The US, long accustomed to observing others adjust, now finds itself under observation, compelled to prove its relevance not through declarations of dominance, but through meaningful engagement. This is perhaps the most uncomfortable adjustment any empire must make, as perception rewires the system faster than bureaucratic machinery can respond. Whether the old power adapts or resists remains uncertain, but the catalyst has already done its work by simply exposing that the emperor might need new clothes. And once people see that possibility, they rarely unsee it.